Hi, everyone, and welcome back to CUNY Uncut, where we talk about anything and everything, uncensored, unedited, and uncut. And one of the main points of CUNY TV and CUNY Uncut is telling stories and how we want to tell stories and inspire people to be the next narrators, to just go out and do the things that you want to do. And here with me today is going to be a prime example of that. She's already won awards for making her documentaries. She won Best Documentary Film at the ReelWorks Film Festival. It's a junior from Brooklyn College. And without further ado, I'd like to give a very warm welcome to Vanessa Cruz. Vanessa, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. So I already mentioned that award that you just won. Congratulations, first of all.
Thank you.
So it was called The Making of a Matriarch. It was about your grandmother. And I just kind of wanted to ask a little bit about the process of making that documentary.
Sure. So basically, I was part of the Dual Language Doc Lab program with ReelWorks, which is a nonprofit organization, and they help people who are interested in like film and television who either know where they want to go or they're not sure where they want to start. So in the Dual Language Doc Lab program, we worked for 5 weeks to make a documentary from July of 2024 to August 2024. And so it was 3 weeks of pre-production, 1 week of filming, and 1 week of post-production. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do until the week before we had to start filming. Because originally I wanted to make a documentary about like immigration policy and talk about my grandma's experience coming here in 1965 and compare it to the experiences that other Dominican immigrants have today and like how it's changed or how it hasn't changed. But because the documentary was only supposed to be 10 minutes, I didn't want to tell both of those stories and kind of dilute the information and not give people enough details for either one. So it took me in a different direction where now instead of just including my grandma, I also included myself and my mother. And it was like an intergenerational story between the three of us, just showing, my grandma's story coming here and how it's impacted the lives that me and my family have today.
Wow, that's really wonderful, and it's a really wonderful story that we'll also touch upon. But I wanted to ask, how did you originally get involved with ReelWorks to get this amazing opportunity to make this documentary?
I actually went to the IRTS workshop in November of 2023, which is the International Radio and Television Society Foundation, and it's for people who are interested in media as well. So they had companies there like Warner Bros. And NBC Universal and Paramount. And I went to the Warner Bros. Desk where I was talking to one of the recruiters. Her name is Gabby Flores Sanchez. So I was talking to her about wanting to get involved with Warner Bros. But because I was only a sophomore, she told me how they mostly take juniors and seniors for internships. And then she suggested that if I'm interested in film, that I should look into ReelWorks, which is part of or they're funded by Warner Brothers Discovery. And so she said that that was a good opportunity for me to start building my portfolio and get involved with the Warner Bros. Community. And so that's what I did. And I think that it was one of the best decisions that I've made. And so I'm very grateful that she suggested that to me.
And it's obviously panned out for you. I wanted to ask about the making of the matriarch and why that was the specific story that you wanted to tell.
I feel like, the making of a matriarch, the title is supposed to be like the ingredients of a matriarch. I feel like it's kind of like you can kind of tell with the title already. But basically, it's supposed to be the upbringings and how a person is raised and how that impacts, their status in your family, I guess. And so my grandma was raised very religiously. But when I said the making of a matriarch, it's because she came here from Dominican Republic and immigrant stories are very often framed as ones of sacrifice, which a lot of the times they are. But I also wanted it to be a story of love. Or actually, that's a story that it turned into because I also thought that it was going to be a story of strictly sacrifice. But I realized that my grandma didn't want to come to America in the first place. She was saying how she was happier in Dominican Republic or she was happy there. She never thought about coming here. And so when I asked her why she came here, she said it was to join my grandfather or the father of her 6 children. And so I kind of felt like it turned out to be more of a love story than one of like having to leave the place where you are to look for better opportunities, even though that is what she did, but it wasn't because of like any push factors. Like she was pulled to the US for better opportunities and, to continue building that life with my grandfather who she loved.
That's honestly just so touching and so heartwarming as a story. And shaping that as, your family's way into the United States is really wonderful. I wanted to ask a little bit about the process of talking to your grandma throughout this entire process of making this documentary and like how she reacted to new information, if things like were brought up differently, or like how both you reacted to it and how she reacted to it.
Well, honestly, interviewing my grandma was a little difficult because she doesn't really like to be on like camera for real. So actually, when we went to go interview her, even though she'd agreed beforehand, it took me and my mom like 2 hours to convince her, like, please, you already agreed. Like, I'm doing this program for the summer. Like, I have to ask you these questions. And then she was like, "Ugh," like, okay, fine. So she, was answering the questions for me. And honestly, during this process, I learned information. I wouldn't say at the same time as everyone else who watched it, but like basically at the same time, because it was also an experience for me and, a real learning experience of how to make a documentary, but also when making that documentary, like figuring out truly my family heritage. I didn't know how she met my grandfather. I didn't know really like I knew what his job was, but I didn't really know the extent to the sacrifices, like how my mom mentioned in the documentary how one of the first meals that her and her siblings ate in the new house in Queens Village was one egg that was fried for 8 people. And so my mom would talk about the struggles that they had growing up, not very frequently, but like doing this interview and speaking to my grandma, I realized how incredible she is to be able to raise 6 children and, really hold down the fort while my grandfather was, making money and supporting everyone.
A real story of strength and love and everything about both like you that you can see through her because you mentioned that it's intergenerational and stuff like that. It's a really wonderful story. I wanted to ask, we talked a little bit about not being able to cover everything because documentary only 10 minutes. For some of the things that you weren't able to touch upon, do you see yourself wanting to revisit that in the future?
Yeah, I think that this documentary program definitely made me more interested in the world of documentary filmmaking because initially I only wanted to be a writer director. But I think that with this program, I realized how accessible it is to make a documentary. I don't need many people to help me. I really just need like myself and a camera. But at the same time, that's not to say that documentary filmmaking is easier because if anything, it's definitely harder in some ways than narrative filmmaking because it's real life. So you might have a plan, but it's not always going to be followed, which is what happened with this story where, plans change. But I think that sometimes it's more of a blessing than an obstacle because it took me to this journey of, telling my grandmother's story and my family's story. But I think that there's definitely things that I want to explore more, like those issues of immigration policy and just like more social justice issues. I'm also interested in, just telling stories of local people in New York and like New York communities. For example, I find the lives of MTA workers interesting. And that's like something that I would want to make a documentary about. Like, what do they do every single day when they're in the train? Like, because, we get off after a couple of stops, but do they do that the whole day or they just go back and forth? But then I'm also interested in stories of like reparations, like Yusuf Salam and the Central Park Five, like how they were wrongfully incarcerated, but now like they're exonerated. Like telling those stories of social justice are important to me as well. So I just want to tell stories of local people, but also stories that change people's perspective, which is what anybody wants to do with storytelling. But yeah.
So it's really wonderful that you want to tell the stories of local people, but why do you feel like you had that sort of connection to New York City in that way? And like, why do you want to tell stories through this sort of light?
I'm not sure. I feel like I'm from Long Island. I'm from Valley Stream, which is right on the border of Queens and Long Island. And I said this before, I feel like I have to clarify that because when people think of Long Island, they mostly think like really deep, like near the beaches, not a lot of diversity. But Valley Stream is actually a very diverse place. And I feel like being surrounded by that diversity made me want to help other people feel the same way and see themselves represented the way that I did in my community. So I want to tell stories of local people because I just feel like they're often overlooked, and I feel like they're just as important as the more global stories, because the global stories are made up of the local people and their experiences. So I feel like it's important to me for New York specifically as well, just because like New York is like the epicenter of change in my opinion. Like so many protests have happened here, so many historical things have happened here, and I feel like it gives me that opportunity to continue to make change in New York, and with that make change, across the nation, hopefully.
Yeah, I agree with you that New York is definitely the start of where everything is going to happen, but it's not just in the city. I mean, you came from a very diverse place, and coming from a background where you get to see all different types of, like, all different walks of life can really help you see the world in a different light. And I wish that the rest of the country, the rest of the world got to experience what we get to experience here in the city.
Yeah.
But I think that it's really wonderful that that's how you kind of want to tell your stories. But I wanted to ask a little bit more about representation in a place like Valley Stream or like in the city, especially of, people of Dominican heritage.
Like what specifically about representation for Dominican?
Well, in a place like that, do you feel like you guys are overrepresented, underrepresented, and like how do you want to get more people acknowledging both your presence and making more stories about that?
That's interesting. I feel like I've never really thought about being overrepresented or underrepresented in Valley Stream, just because I feel like there's a lot of cultural what is it? Is it hybridity? Like when a lot of things like come together. I think that's what it's called. But basically, like I had a lot of friends growing up. Like I've had people of my friends are Jamaican, Trinidadian, Guyanese, So I just feel like a lot of the parts of me are made up of the cultures of my friends. So like I like eating pulori, I like jerk chicken, I like roti. I like all these different types of food, and I feel like they've become a big part of who I am and the things that I'm interested in, because my friends are also a big part of my life. So I feel like their cultures have impacted who I am today. So I feel like I haven't really thought about the issue of Dominican representation in Valley Stream specifically, but being in Valley Stream and like watching TV, that's when I feel like I did realize that there was a lack of representation, because I feel like I did see myself represented in my community, but not on TV. So it was kind of like, well, there's so many of us, like, what's going on? Why don't I see it on the screen? Yeah, so I guess maybe that would be underrepresented,
yeah,
but
so
on the screen.
So let's talk about kind of the bigger picture and literally the big picture, like Hollywood style. Like we don't see some sorts of representation. How would you like to see it implemented more in the future?
I think that I want to see more accurate representation, but it's like, what does accurate representation mean? Because, stories are singular. So people, even though I could be Dominican and somebody else is Dominican, we have different ideas of what representation means to us. And so I feel like that's just what I mean by wanting representation to change, is showing these different experiences. Like, I think that for me, as a Dominican woman, that I am more receptive bilingual, which means that I'm better at understanding Spanish than speaking it. And that's not to say that I'm not trying to learn how to speak Spanish. It just means that I'm not very good at speaking it. And so I feel like with the representation that we see on screen, first, it's a lack of Dominican representation. But for the Hispanic representation that we do have, like, it's very stereotypical. And it's like through one lens. And so I just want to bring in those different ideas of what it is to be a Dominican person, a Hispanic person. Like, as someone who somebody might call no sabo because I'm receptive bilingual, I want to bring that representation and show that, like, I am Dominican, so it's a Dominican story. I don't have to fit what somebody's idea of Hispanic or Dominican is for it to be considered valid. And so that's what I want to do for other people, is just validate their identity and, help them understand that, I guess, just that they're valid.
This is who you are, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, like they don't have to change.
Yeah, but we want to try and move away from that, and I think we may or may... It's tough to really say, like, if we're moving in the right direction, but I think, need a really big shift in order to, like, see the change that we want to see. And, like, we have to be a part of that change. And I feel like, you're starting in the right direction, and like hopefully we will get you there. But I wanted to ask a little bit more about what types of things you want to do once you start, screenwriting.
Well, actually, right now, in my advanced television dramatic script writing class last semester, we had to write a 50-page pilot. And
Oof.
so, yeah, it was for, dramatic screenwriting. So my show that I want to create is a dramedy, and it's a coming of age, and it's called Gloria. So it's named after my grandma again, something about my grandma. But it basically takes place in 1980s Queens Village, New York, and it's supposed to pay homage to Dominican culture and baseball and New York and, those experiences that we have when we're growing up. And even though it's a different time period, I feel like the experiences that a young girl has is, it transcends different time periods. And so I feel like for the people who do watch it, whenever I get to create the show, I think that they'll be able to relate to the characters that are in my story, even though they're not from that time period. And like with Dominican culture and representation, it's kind of based on the way that I grew up, but at the same time, it's also relevant to that time period. So I'm still trying to figure out how to write it, but I know that, I want it to be a coming of age and just include a lot of different cultures. Like, it's not just Dominican representation that's in the show.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. That seems like it's a very specific experience, but it can be related to on so many different fronts, especially with people in New York City. So how is that something that you also kind of try and incorporate, especially like once you're at the small scale and then moving it up to like cater to a bunch of different audiences?
Well, I think that a lot of people say to write what you know, which I think is true, but also like with any screenplay that you write, you have to do research. And I think that, like, for example, like people say when you have a doctor in your screenplay, it means that you have to be a doctor yourself, I guess. Like, obviously, I can't know everything about being a doctor,
Right.
but like I have to know the things for that specific character because you want it to be accurate. And so for me, like in the script that I'm writing, I have a character that's of Jamaican culture, and then I have a character who's Venezuelan, and I'm not from either of those places, but I want to write it accurately. So I'm going to do research on Venezuelan culture, Jamaican culture, so I can put those experiences in my characters, but then also combine the experiences of that specific culture with the experiences that I know or I think adolescents have at that age. So it can be something that, people of those cultures see themselves represented in, but at the same time, even if you're not a part of that specific group, you can still relate to the experiences that they're having.
Right. That makes sense. But I also wanted to ask how it's different experiencing things and then telling your story versus, doing your research on it and then telling a story. It's a little different.
I think it's very different, but I don't know. I think you have to do research either way though. Like with me, I was talking about how I want the experiences to be about my experiences growing up so I could show that different part of being Dominican. But at the same time, I want people to relate to it, but everybody can't like what I'm making. And I think that that's something that I'm still trying to figure out early in my career is that I can't make everybody happy.
Yes.
So these things will probably change because I did only start the script last semester. So I am still like rewriting it and doing research for it. But I think that something that I need to learn is that I can't make everybody happy.
Yeah.
So I think that I think that experiencing it is different because, you actually went through it. And I think that researching it is different because as much research as you do, you still haven't lived the lives that these people have lived. And I think that that's an issue that comes with the stories being told behind the screen by people who aren't of this specific background. Like, I don't want to get controversial though, but like, well, I mean, it's important though. Like, if a white person is doing research on, a black person's life, like Walking While Black, I think, James Cadigan. I forgot his first name, but I know somebody by the name of Cadigan wrote that. And he was talking about his experiences as a black man, walking and how people react to that. And I remember how I was debating with one of my professors because he said how, you know, as a white person, as long as you do the research for like what a black person is going through, that you could write those same experiences, like to the same degree of like the truth. And so I was debating that. I don't think that that's true because as much research as you do, you're still not a black person who's had to go through these experiences. So you'll never truly understand the extent to what you're writing about, like as much research as you do. So those are the differences, I think, of like experiencing it and researching it, is that you can research it as much as you want, but it's never going to be as accurate as if it was told by the person who actually experienced it.
Exactly. You don't live that life day to day.
Yeah.
So you can't really tell that story through the same sort of lens. So then how important is it that these different types of people in different types of cultures, these specific niche cultures, tell their stories, especially through filmmaking and documentary?
It's like very, very important, especially with the time that we're going to, like, these next couple years. We don't know, how things will become. And so I think that having that diversity is even more important. I think that, we have a lot more groups now that are dedicated to diversity and uplifting minorities and voices that haven't been heard. And so I think that people really need to take advantage of that, especially for the programs where they don't cost money. Like RealWorks doesn't cost money. You just have to apply and, take a chance, and it's a very welcoming community as well. And so I feel like a lot of those communities that are made for minority groups are very uplifting.
Yes.
And so I think that people should really take advantage of that and share their story and share their voices, because it's probably going to be, battled against, I guess.
Yeah.
For some reason, all my
It's always
vocabulary is
uphill.
out the window.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's going to be, challenged by people who are in power. And so I feel like, especially now, people should work hard to tell their voices and, read as much as they can.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Because you mentioned it before, every story is valid. We just want you to tell it. So we're trying to create the next generation of storytellers.
Yeah.
And getting these opportunities in, whether it be RealWorks, whether it be Warner Brothers, whether it be whoever. So you just got to sign up for those opportunities. So sign up for your school's newsletter, guys. Please get all the opportunities in the door that you possibly can. Because
and let me add something to that. Also, please go to your career center at your school, because I go to my career center at my school and they help me very much with my resume, and they can help you with interview skills, looking for job opportunities. Even if you're not sure what you want, you also can go to them for that, so that they can guide you into different directions that might, align with the things that you're interested in. Because even if you don't want an internship, or maybe you can't get an internship because you don't have the experience, you can still attend networking events. You can still attend Zooms. You can sign up for the newsletter, like you said. Like, I'm part of my school's In Focus newsletter, which sends out internships weekly so that I can apply to different things. So just like, people need to get involved.
Yeah, the film industry is so hard to break into, we understand. And like every industry these days, but really just try and keep pushing on the door, keep knocking on it, and eventually you'll get through. But I wanted to ask a little bit about kind of what's next for you. I mean, I know you just started an internship and you're only a junior, so you got a little bit of time left before you graduate.
Well, what's next for me? I actually am applying to, just because I'm applying doesn't mean I'm going to get it, but fingers crossed. I'm applying to the Sundance X Adobe Ignite Fellowship, where you submit a film and then you can submit either a pitch deck or a script, and hopefully if you get accepted, you can be a fellow for the summer. And then I'm always applying to stuff, so I'm applying to other internships. I want to work on a documentary that's going to be about, what is it? I want to work on a documentary that's going to be about reparations. There's this lawyer, his name is Roger Wareham, and he's part of the December 12th movement. And basically the December 12th movement works towards reparations and but on like not on an individual level, because I think that when people think of reparations, they think of like an individual check, which is something that was said at this meeting that I went to, which was a pre-Black Solidarity Day meeting for my school, and so I wrote a newspaper article about it. But basically, they're not looking for reparations on an individual level. They're asking for like a $50 billion down payment towards reparations, so that they can put money into like the healthcare system and education and really building community for these, like Black communities. And so I think that making a documentary about them and their mission would be interesting, because it's also connected to the things that are happening in New York City, I think. And so I'm also interested in interviewing council member Yusuf Salaam on his journey after being exonerated, helping other people, go through that as well, and also just making changes in the New York community. Because Roger Wareham was actually one of 3 lawyers for Yusuf Salaam and the other, Central Park 5 members. So I think having those in conversation would be interesting, just to talk about reparations on a global scale, but also then like on a local level, as Yusuf Salaam is like a New York City council member, and they've worked together before as Roger Wareham was his, representation. So I think that would be an interesting documentary to make. But also, I think another interesting documentary would just be about, like the local stories. Like my friend, she's a producer and she goes to Purchase. And so we were talking about making a documentary about her over the winter break, or like starting to plan then, so that we can talk about her journey being a producer and going to Purchase and like what she wants to tell with her music. So I think that that's something that I want to work on as well.
I really think that you have such a lovely way of approaching all this, and you have so many different stories that you want to tell, and there will be so many more that pop up at any instant. So for the people who just want to, go out there and film, but they don't know how to start, how would you suggest really like just getting into it and like getting their documentaries in the door?
Honestly, I'm still trying to figure it out myself. But I think, I don't know. I don't want to say just make it, because a lot of people say that, and I've also heard that advice, but it still didn't really help me, because it's like what do you mean just make it? Like, it's hard when you're trying to figure out what you want to do creatively and how you want to be as an artist. So I think for people who want to make a film and haven't started yet, I think, again, look for those opportunities that will guide you, like, so you can join those organizations that will help you. Because if it wasn't for RealWorks, I don't think I would have ever taken that step to make my first documentary. But now that I have made it and I know that I can do it, I'm ready to make another one, and I'm ready to make a better one. And so I think looking for those organizations, but I also think building your community, and really, honestly, people should look in the mirror and do those things where they like I'm gonna have a good day today. What is it called when you do that? Do you remember?
Self-reflect. Literally self-reflection.
Maybe it is self-reflection. It's like basically like build yourself up in the morning, I guess. Like, today's gonna be a good day. I'm talented. Like I wrote Post-it notes before to do that for me, because with entertainment industry, it's such a competitive field, and everybody believes that they're the best of the best, I think. But you kind of have to think that way, because otherwise you're going to be like, oh, like my story isn't as good as theirs. So I think just really trying to work on your belief in yourself, whether it's journaling or going to therapy or talking to friends. I think once you have that confidence and belief in yourself, that making a film will be much easier, even if you don't necessarily have the tools or the community. It'll help you be more innovative, I think, and it'll help you challenge yourself, because you'll realize that like you are just as worthy and possible at being, at the highest level as anybody else.
Yeah. Wow. That's really just, it warms my heart to really like have that that outlook on life. But that's just amazing. But thank you so much for joining me today. This has really been amazing, and I'm so excited to see all the new documentaries that you're going to come out with. And congratulations again on winning Best Documentary Film for your Making of a Matriarch.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you for tuning in, and make sure to check out CUNY Uncut on social media and download the CUNY TV app. And I'm your host, David Horn, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.